Okay, this is the second part of 3.2, and we're working with complex numbers. I want to first start off right here with the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. And I want you to see if you know it right off the bat. Can you tell me what the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is? Well, if you can't, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is equal to the square root of 4, right? 2 times 2, that's 4, stays in the square root. And what's the square root of 4? 2. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. The square root of 5 times the square root of 5, that's equal to the square root of 25, which is equal to 5. So the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is just 5. Yeah. How about the square root of 131 times the square root of 131? Well, you could even rewrite this as a square root of 131 squared. Right? Anything multiplied by itself is squared. And that square root squared is equal to 131. Okay. Now about a little bit of review from 3.1 part 1. What is the square root of negative 25 equal to? Well, it's equal to the square root of 25 times the square root of negative 1. What's the square root of 25? That's 5. The square root of negative 1 is equal to I. And that answers our next question. What does I equal? I equals the square root of negative 1. Okay. So down here, what is negative 1? What is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1? Well, it's just negative 1. Okay, can I write this? Because the square root of negative 1 is I times I is equal to the same thing, right? Negative 1. That's our focus today on 3.2 part 2, is I times I is equal to negative 1. So, multiply, write the answer in standard form. Remember, in standard form, the I trails. Okay? So here we have 2I times I. Well, if we multiply these together, we get 2 times I times I. And we just talked about that, right? What's I times I down here? It's negative 1. So this is equal to 2 times negative 1. And what's 2 times negative 1? It's equal to negative 2. Okay. This one. We have to distribute the I to both inside the parentheses. Right? What's I times 4? Well, that's just 4I. And what's I times I? That's negative 1. So we have 4I minus 1. Rewrite that in standard form. We have negative 1 plus 4I. That I always trails. Okay, that's standard form. Okay, let's see. What's down here? Ooh. All right. We have 2 binomials. Okay, 2 things in parentheses. We have to multiply these together. All right, which means we have to FOIL. FOIL. If you don't remember FOIL, write it down. I'm going to write it down here. FOIL. Actually, redo that. F is going to be in red, O in blue, I in green, and L in black. Okay, FOIL. FOIL. F is first. So we take the first terms in both binomials, 4 and I, and we multiply them together. What's 4 times I? That's 4I. O is outside. Outside. The outside of both binomials, so it's the furthest ones away from each other, the 4 and the 6. We multiply them together. What's 4 times 6? That's 24. Okay, that's outside. What do you think I is? That's inside. Or the two closest to each other, negative 5I and I. What's negative 5I times I? Well, that's like saying negative 5 times, what's I times I? Negative 1. And we'll simplify this in a second. And then what's L? It's last. Okay, the last two. Negative 5I and 6. Multiply those together. Negative 5I times 6, that's like saying negative 30I. Okay, now simplify. And we are left with, I'm going to combine like terms. What are my like terms? Well, we have this 4I here and negative 30I. So that would be what? Negative 26I. Okay. This 24 just falls straight down. It's 24 plus 24. Where did I get that 24? Right here. And then I'm going to simplify. Negative 5 times negative 1, that's plus 5. Okay, now simplify. We have negative 26I. What's 24 plus 5? Plus 29. Okay, now I have to write this in standard form, right? I always goes last. So 29 minus 26I. Okay, next one. F is first. First terms. So we have 3I times 7I. Well, 3 times 7, that's 21. I times I, that's negative 1. Okay, so 21 times negative 1. Can I rewrite that? Just says negative 21. Sure, it can. Okay, then outside, furthest two away from each other. 3 times negative 10 is negative 30, and that I stays attached. Okay, inside, the two closest to each other. 4 times 7I is 28I. And lastly, we have the last two terms, which is 4 and negative 10. 4 times negative 10 is negative 40. Okay, now simplify. Alright, I have negative 21, I have negative 40, which is negative 61. I have negative 30 and 28I, negative 30I and 28I, which is what, negative 2I? And the I is already in the back. So we're good. Okay, here we are solving the equation. We're solving for x. Okay, so how do we solve for x? Well, we want to get x by itself. We're going to subtract 4 first. This is review from 3.1. We're left with x squared is equal to negative 4. Okay? Solve for x. Well, to get rid of that square, we have to take the square root of both sides. we are left with x is equal to, okay, this is where it gets a tad confusing. Remember, when we have to solve for x, we're always left with a plus or minus or positive or negative answer. Okay, so plus or minus. What's the square root of 4? It's 2. What's the square root of negative 4? Well, it's 2i. Okay, so that is our final answer. Let's try it on this one. I'm going to take 6 away. Take 6 away. We're left with x squared equals negative 49. Okay, take the square root. It crosses out the square. We're left with x is equal to, what's the square root of negative 49? Well, it's positive or negative 7i, because we're solving for x. Positive or negative, square root of 49 is 7. Square root of negative 49 is 7i. Okay, this says find the zeros in the function, of the function. All this is taking f of x, saying that's equal to 0 equals x squared plus 9. Solve for x. Then we're going to subtract 9, we're left with negative 9 equals x squared. Take the square root. X is equal to, what's the square root of negative 9? Either positive or negative 3i. And same with this one. Take g of x set equal to 0 equals 5x squared plus 15. Alright, now solve for x. We're going to subtract 15. We're left with negative 15. Oh, alright in red. My apologies. Negative 15 equals 5x squared. Solve for x. What do we have to do first? Don't take the square root yet. We're going to get rid of that 5. Okay, so we're left with negative 3 equals x squared. And let me scroll down here. Okay, now what's left? Take the square root to solve for x. We left with x is equal to. Okay, now we can rewrite this. We can write this as the square root of 3 times the square root of negative 1, right? And it's going to be positive or negative. The square root of 3 we're going to leave. But what's the square root of negative 1? That's I. So our answer is going to be plus or minus I times the square root of 3 is equal to x. That is it.